And welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, the White House condemns a report on Biden's mental health.
Meanwhile, House Republicans block a contraceptive bill.
And we honor the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. Well, as I said, the White House is now slamming a new Wall Street Journal report about President Biden's mental fitness, calling it a political hit piece. The report cites dozens of lawmakers and administration officials, including some Democrats, and they describe Biden as confused, forgetful, and even incapable of participating in meetings without using note cards. One of the report's main sources was former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who has frequently shared stories about Biden's mental health.
You've met with them behind closed doors. And listen, when you give a speech, you have teleprompters that can rattle people, and we see the president stumble, mess up words and names. But when you meet
he still has a teleprompter when you meet behind closed doors. But the teleprompter are cards. I found when I met with him, it would just be a couple. He would read from the card.
Just the two of you, and he's reading from cards.
It's like four of us, yeah. And if you deviate, like I didn't sit and negotiate with him the debt ceiling. It's not capable. He just sticks to the cards. And if you deviate from the cards, he can't continue onward there.
Now, critics point out that most of the negative descriptions came from Republicans. For example, former Democrat Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the report ignored her positive comments about the president. But despite the piece's potential bias, it does at least seem to line up with other reports about Biden's mental acuity, such as special counsel Robert Hur's description of Biden as a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, as well as a recent interview with Time magazine where President Biden confused Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and sometimes made unintelligible remarks, according to the transcript.
Meanwhile, a Bloomberg opinion piece is blowing a hole in Biden's economics with a newly released report. Bloomberg opinion executive editor Robert Burgess posted on X this week that job growth under Biden is way less impressive than what we've been told. According to Bloomberg's analysis, monthly non-farm payroll prints likely overstates job growth by 730,000 last year, with hiring maybe even falling below zero in October. When the numbers are adjusted for these distortions, the current job growth is below 100,000 per month this year. This is well under the 242,000 jobs reported by official surveys. This means that by the end of this year, true job growth will be likely overstated by at least 1 million. Another Bloomberg opinion piece adds that while not every economic downturn can be attributed solely to Biden, the truth is that the cost of living grew much heavier under his watch, and many voters will judge him for that.
And this is going to be the true thorn in the side for President Biden going into this election because, yeah, you can fudge the numbers and political spin, so many different issues, but when it comes to the economy, people know, whether you say it or not, if they have a job and how much things cost at the grocery store.
Yes, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting for him for sure this season.
Meanwhile, House Republicans have now issued criminal referrals for both Hunter Biden as well as James Biden, alleging that they lied to Congress. Republicans leading the impeachment inquiry into President Biden sent a letter to the DOJ this week, and in it, they detail what they call overwhelming evidence that both Hunter and James lied about their overseas business dealings in a closed-door meeting with lawmakers. Democrats, meanwhile, are condemning the referrals as a last-ditch effort in what they called their fruitless investigation into the Biden family.
And speaking of Hunter Biden, the current trial just unveiled another piece to the infamous laptop scandal. FISM's Ian Patrick breaks down this information.
Well, the trial against Hunter Biden is ongoing, and I'm sure it was expected that the infamous Hunter Biden laptop would make an appearance at some point. That topic did turn up this week, and we amazingly got another revelation. On Tuesday, the prosecution used the laptop, as well as the data and many unflattering images of the president's son, in their round of questioning. Speaking with FBI Special Agent Erica Jensen, the prosecution asked if the laptop was indeed real and if anything had been altered or tampered with. Jensen confirmed the laptop's authenticity, saying the Bureau had painstakingly worked to verify the piece of tech since late 2019. Megyn Kelly on her show detailed the timeline in which the FBI reportedly verified this laptop via this testimony.
Jensen detailed how law enforcement obtained the laptop's hard drive in the fall of 2019 after receiving a tip from a computer store. All right, so fall of 2019 is when the FBI obtained the laptop. They used forensic tools to extract data from the laptop after obtaining a search warrant December 13th, 2019, December 13th. So by that date, they knew that it was Hunter's, and they went through exactly how they figured it out, that they cross-referenced Hunter Biden's iCloud storage accounts with the computer's serial number.
So according to that testimony, the government then knew the laptop was real all along, despite claims in late 2020 that it was Russian disinformation. That obviously flies in the face of how the media initially treated the laptop when it was first reported by the New York Post. Namely, most reported that the laptop was vetted as definitely being a fake. One notorious example was between Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes and former President Donald Trump. Trump released an unedited version of this interview in which Stahl says the laptop cannot be verified, despite Trump telling them to look into it.
I think it's one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen, and you don't cover it. You want to talk about...
Well, because it can't be verified.
You want to talk about insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course it can be verified. Excuse me, they found the laptop. Leslie.
It can't be verified.
What can't be verified?
The laptop.
Why do you say that?
Because
even the family hasn't...
It also points a finger at how the Biden campaign similarly treated this information. For instance, how Biden talked about it during the first presidential debate in late September of 2020.
The mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million. What did he do to deserve it? What did he do with Burisma to deserve $183,000?
You've asked a question, let him answer.
None of that is true.
Oh, really?
Totally,
He didn't get $3.5 million?
Mr. President,
Mr.
President, please.
Totally discredited. Totally discredited.
As well as his response during the second presidential debate in late October, mere weeks from the election itself.
Don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody's
President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
I have to respond to that.
Please,
because look,
very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
Now it remains to be seen how this revelation might impact Hunter Biden's case, as he is charged with lying about drug use in order to purchase a handgun. But as former litigator and current political commentator Viva Free says during Megyn Kelly's program,
this is actual election interference. It is intelligence lying to the public during an election cycle, pressuring social media to suppress the story that they know is true while, cloaking the lie in something that is semantically ambiguous.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks so much, Ian, for that report. I'm sure that is not the last we're going to hear about that laptop anytime soon. Elsewhere, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, he's accusing Democrats of acting unethically for making recusal demands of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. Those calls came from Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin, along with Senators Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island.
These senators are telling the Chief Justice privately to change the course of pending litigation. This is known as ex parte communication, and it is frowned upon by the ABA's Model Code of Judicial Conduct.
These Democrats asked Chief Justice John Roberts to demand Alito's recusal for flying flags at his homes they say shows bias in cases related to the 2020 election. At the same time, they also wanted Justice Clarence Thomas's recusal as well. Roberts, meanwhile, denied those requests.
This matters because at least two of these colleagues of ours, the junior senator from Rhode Island and the senior senator from Connecticut, seem to be members of the Supreme Court bar. If so, they are therefore potentially engaging in unethical professional conduct before the court.
McConnell says the court should now take any remedial action it feels to be appropriate to address their behavior.
Meanwhile, House Republicans want to move Trump's state court cases to the federal government. Republicans introduced a bill called the No More Political Prosecutions Act, which allows a current or former president and vice president to transfer state prosecution cases to the federal government, such as Trump's New York hush money case. Meanwhile, Speaker Mike Johnson is reportedly planning on targeting the DOJ with increased oversight, funding cuts, and other means. House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan said on Monday that cutting funding for state prosecutors investigating Trump may be a good idea too. Trump is facing charges in Georgia as well related to the 2020 elections. And if the new anti-prosecution bill passes, he could move these cases to the federal level, which means he could potentially pardon himself if elected president. And we'll get into international news when we come back from this break.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay, or to go, to remain the same, or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Do you know what you are supporting when you purchase mutual funds and stocks? Think about it. When you invest in a company, you make a decision to support the things that that company supports. And it may not be things that you agree with. Financial Issues is a ministry teaching people like you how to invest biblically, responsibly, keeping your investments clear of companies that may support an ungodly agenda. Learn more by going to financialissues.org. Financialissues.org.
But I felt very comfortable in that decision because I found a lot of support. Like everyone here, always made sure keep in contact with me. This is what ultimately changed my decision, knowing that I had all this support that I didn't know I had. Now that he's here, he's 4 months old, I look at him and I honestly, it just makes me want to cry,
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's start our international coverage with an update from Israel. The IDF says they took operational control of some areas in central Gaza. This includes sections of a refugee camp and another town where reportedly dozens of Palestinians were killed in the process. The IDF says their operation targeted terrorists and terrorist infrastructure above and below ground. According to the most recent updates from IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari, the Israeli Air Force also attacked a number of military buildings in the Itatron area today, which is located in southern Lebanon. He said that Israel attacked 2 Hezbollah terrorists in that area as well. This adds to their previous weekend attacks in southern Lebanon as the IDF tries to eliminate Hezbollah operatives.
Elsewhere, Lebanese officials arrested 6 people this week in connection with gunfire near the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Security officials say at least one person at the embassy was wounded. That would be a local embassy guard. The suspect is reported to be a Syrian national with possible ties to ISIS, according to the State Department.
We are aware that the individual who was arrested was wearing what appeared to be ISIS insignia, but we are conducting a full investigation with the Lebanese authorities into the actual motivations.
State Department officials are now working closely with the Lebanese government to further investigate.
Meanwhile, yesterday, the UN Atomic Energy Agency voted to censure Iran over alleged failures to cooperate with the organization, as well as over perceived advancements in their nuclear program. The board of mostly Western European representatives voted 20-2 to pass the resolution. The White House had initially opposed the resolution, threatening to abstain from the vote. However, the morning before the vote, Biden administration officials announced that the U.S. would vote in favor of the bill. Representatives of China and Russia were the only two to vote against it. Iranian officials had previously threatened to restart their nuclear program with reduced international oversight if the resolution passed. Following the vote, an Iranian representative told reporters, quote, that the agency would bear responsibility for any kind of consequences.
Meanwhile, major threats are coming from Moscow as Russian President Vladimir Putin said this week that Russia might begin arming allied countries to attack the West. His threats come in response to recent efforts by the U.S. and others to arm Ukraine with long-range weapons to strike targets on Russian soil. Putin said this about the situation, quote, "If someone thinks it's possible to supply such weapons to a war zone to attack our territory and create problems for us, why don't we have the right to supply weapons of the same class to regions of the world where there will be strikes on sensitive facilities of those countries?" Putin didn't specify which countries he would give those weapons to, but he did seem to single out Germany as a potential target, as it recently greenlit Ukraine to strike Russia with German weapons, though Putin denied having any plans to attack a NATO ally, strangely enough, as Germany is a NATO ally, at least for now.
And today marks the 80th anniversary of D-Day. French President Emmanuel Macron led the international ceremony at Omaha Beach in Normandy. Those in attendance included President Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and European Council President Charles Michel. The international heads of state paid their respects to the 150,000 soldiers who landed on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. Here's a snippet from President Biden's speech.
The men who fought here became heroes, not because they were the strongest or toughest or most fiercest, although they were, but because they were given an audacious mission, knowing, every one of them knew, the probability of dying was real. But they did it anyway. They knew, beyond any doubt, there are things that are worth fighting and dying for. The men who fought here became...
Excuse us there. D-Day commemorations have become important from a diplomatic and political perspective in recent years, but it wasn't always like that. In the beginning, the commemorations were almost exclusively French. It was only in 1984 that France invited 6 international heads of state, including President Ronald Reagan and Queen Elizabeth from England. And we have more news coming up next, but first, in honor of D-Day, let's go to Seth Yudinsky for a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Yudinsky. In 1944, the safety and prosperity of the free world hung in the balance as the bloodiest war in human history raged on. Germany and Japan, leading the Axis assault on the world, were showing no signs of surrender as World War II approached its 6th year. If the Allies were going to stop the Axis, they needed to make a dramatic and monumental move. So as the summer of 1944 approached, the Allies, under the command of American General Dwight David Eisenhower, hatched a plan to launch a massive amphibious invasion into Western Europe to crush the Nazis once and for all. This invasion began on June 6, 1944, on a day which would live in American lore as D-Day. By 1944, Eisenhower and the Allied leaders came to realize that a full-scale, massive invasion was necessary to deal the knockout blow to the Nazis. The campaign was codenamed Operation Overlord. Interestingly enough, actually, D-Day was not originally even supposed to happen on June 6th. The Allied commanders had planned for June 5th, but the weather on the 5th was suspect, leaving General Eisenhower with little choice but to delay the invasion for one more day. On the morning of June 6th, roughly 160,000 Allied troops descended upon the beaches of Normandy on the west coast of France in a landing that has become the stuff of legend. These beaches were codenamed Sword, Juno, Omaha, Gold, and Utah. The Germans were not about to roll over without a fight, and suspecting some kind of invasion, the Nazis had placed many snipers on the island in foxholes to pick off the descending Allies as they reached the shore. At many landing points on the Norman coast, the chances of survival for many of this first wave of troops was 50-50. In that first initial day and those days immediately after, as many as 4,000 allies were killed and many more were wounded or captured. The cost was great, but the cost was worth it. The Allies overtook the Germans on the French coast and began to make their way inland. Now, over the next several months, the Allies freed the French capital of Paris and then made their way to Berlin. With the Americans and Brits closing in from the west and the Soviets banging down the door in the east, Nazi Germany stood ready to fall. It finally did in the spring of 1945, thanks to the heroic sacrifices of so many on D-Day and in the battles that followed. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay, or to go, to remain the same, or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Do you know what you are supporting when you purchase mutual funds and stocks? Think about it. When you invest in a company, you make a decision to support the things that that company supports. And it may not be things that you agree with. Financial Issues is a ministry teaching people like you how to invest biblically, responsibly, keeping your investments clear of companies that may support an ungodly agenda. Learn more by going to financialissues.org. Financialissues.org.
But I felt very comfortable in that decision because I found a lot of support. Like everyone here, like always made sure like keep in contact with me. This is what ultimately changed my decision, knowing that I had all this support that I didn't know I had. Now that he's here, he's 4 months old, like I look at him and I honestly, like, it just makes me want to cry,
Hey there and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We begin with this news from the border. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has now launched a new top 10 most wanted list for illegal immigrants. Abbott says this list is specifically meant to help find repeat offenders, and it's being coordinated with the state's Department of Public Safety and offers a reward of up to $5,000. Of the current top 10, 6 of them are wanted for sex crimes with children, and one is accused of making terror threats. This, of course, follows Biden's new executive order limiting asylum claims between ports of entry at the southern border. Abbott says the president still isn't enforcing federal border laws.
There is nothing in the announcement today that actually shows any enforcement of any immigration law that denies illegal entry into the country. He talks about trying to have this asylum process and changing the rules that actually will allow more people in. What Biden did today was actually entice more people to come to our border, to increase illegal immigration, not to stop it.
And some quick weather updates here. The dangerous heat dome continues to swell across California and most of the Southwest, driving above average temperatures. It's the hottest temperatures to hit the U.S. this year. Phoenix, Las Vegas, and much of the region expect to set new daily records before the sweltering heat breaks. The triple-digit daytime temperatures are also keeping the nights above 80 degrees in some areas. That's breaking a different kind of record while making relief impossible without air conditioning. The heat wave started as a high-pressure area over Mexico and is still expanding. It will sweep east throughout the rest of this week.
So I hope if you're watching in that area, you find some way to beat the heat. I know it sounds very tough indeed. Elsewhere, in some economic news here, a possible Texas-based stock exchange is now backed by a whopping $120 million in investments. BlackRock, Citadel, and nearly 24 other investors are working to launch this exchange. It's being marketed as apolitical and CEO-friendly with less red tape than New York or the NASDAQ. Founders say they are capitalizing on the state's pro-business image, which has attracted major companies like AT&T and Tesla, and has also led to Texas competing economically with California. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission still needs to approve the operation itself, but the Dallas-based exchange does plan to start trading sometime next year.
Meanwhile, as expected, the GOP Senate blocked the Democrat bill intended to enshrine birth control access into federal law. You may remember we mentioned yesterday that the Democrats introduced a bill that would have protected unlimited access to all forms of birth control, including abortion pills. The Senate voted against it 51-39, and GOP senators said it's nothing more than political messaging. They added it's also unnecessary and overly broad. Republican Senator John Cornyn said that the bill is a huge overreach and a phony vote because contraception is not illegal or unavailable. Democrat Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also voted against a bill last minute so that his party could have the chance to bring it up again in the future.
And speaking of the battle over reproductive issues going into this election cycle, Senator Rick Scott is now trying to nip the whole IVF controversy in the bud as the Florida senator launched a new ad campaign as part of his re-elect effort this week, rejecting the notion that Republicans want to ban IVF. Here's a part of that ad.
Let's get real. IVF, in vitro fertilization, has brought beautiful babies to so many families. For me, it's personal. My youngest daughter has been undergoing IVF treatments to grow her family. I'm Rick Scott, and this grandpa will always protect IVF.
The ad itself cost somewhere around 7 figures. Scott told Fox News the ad is meant to serve as a sort of template for Republicans this election cycle, specifically on this issue of IVF. He said to Fox, quote, "I refuse to let any Democrat try to lie about my stance on IVF and contraceptives in their desperate attempt to try to win an election." Now, Scott's ad here also comes as Texas Senator Ted Cruz introduced a bill last month meant to protect IVF nationwide. Here he is.
It provides a categorical protection for IVF. And the reason I did it is, number one, I strongly support IVF. I think IVF is an incredible technology. I mean, it has given millions of parents hope who couldn't otherwise have children. You know, the statistics are amazing. 2% of all births in America come from IVF. In the Senate, to the best of my knowledge, all 100 senators support IVF. I'm not aware of a single senator who doesn't.
It's a really sticky ethical and political issue, so I completely understand why Republicans are trying to get in front of this thing and try to basically just cut off the conversation while they can.
Right. I think it's such an ethically and morally complex question, and I think it's also very personal, like the ad that we saw. So I think a lot of people are just not ready to really...
Especially while the whole abortion conversation is going on as well. Just too many things at once.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And for more updates until our next show tomorrow night, be sure to follow us on social media. Just type in @FISM News on your favorite platform. Thanks so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.